The following is an encore performance of the Voice of Bold Business.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. Today, we're talking with Blair Glaser, who is a psychotherapist, executive coach, and organizational consultant that delights in helping people stand in their authority at home and at work. And today, we are really talking about the truth about things that we hate to do. And what came out of this that was loud and clear is that it's so hard to even talk about. We went to the transformation. Okay, we're talking about change, recognizing, understanding, and then what do we do about these things that we don't like, with practical examples, both that she shared and that I shared, as well as what we do instinctively when we find ourselves faced with things we hate. You'll get to hear the conversation right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less.
One of the women who I've been working with said, listen, I've got a situation I want to ask you about some dating advice. And I was like, okay. I was like, did you know that I do that? And I did that in my former life as a therapist. My focus was mostly relationships. And she was like, yeah, I read your blog. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I think that I'm invisible to some of the more corporate people that I work with. And she said, after I talked to her, you really need to write a book about this. And I thought, oh my God, this is not the direction I've been heading in, but I'll think about it. Turns out in the next 10 days, 2 more women said the same thing to me about the dating advice. So then I started thinking, okay, now I have personally a lot of experience with dating. Took me a long time to find the right partner. I went through a whole thing. I've collected tons of information. I do have unique advice that I'm not seeing out there in the books. This could be good. This could be exciting. It could get me back to working with women. I think that there's a path here, and I got all excited, and then boom, hit the wall. And what it's been about for me as I've been looking at the resistance is that the way that I worked in the sort of online solopreneur, put things out there way, never fit my style. And for me to start to put myself out there about this again, it seems like I would have to go back to that. So the reason why I told this whole story is what's energized me is that now I'm starting to look for ways to put that out there that I haven't done it before. And instead of writing a number of blogs and doing content marketing and trying to drum up stuff, I have decided to give a talk at a local temple.
Awesome.
So that's exciting to me. And that was my way out of the resistance. And for me, in that experience, the resistance had a message. One could say it's fear. One could say maybe it'll work for you this time. And all of that's true. But the way out of it for me was to find something I hadn't done before.
And I find that really interesting, Blair, because you recognized the serendipity of, hello, do this thing. And it showed up 2 more times. Do this thing. And Serial, you were like, okay. And it turned out that was the path to get you through.
That's right. That's right.
And one of the things that is really amazing to me is that when we stop and we look, when we stop and we listen, there's so much that we can find, because I do the same thing. And in fact, I've had a couple of things show up in the last few weeks, multiple times. And I'm like, what? All right. I'm just going to sit with that and go, I hear ya. We'll see. I'm actually very similar in the sense that I'm like, okay, I hear it. Now I have to decide it. Part of this concept of doing things that you hate to do, it might start from a fear of decision making. Oh my gosh, when we make a choice, we're putting our stake in the sand. We're saying, this is the way it's going to be. And we forget that we can pick up the stick and move it.
So I think you're hitting the nail on the head that one of the things that gets in our way about moving forward with action is that we get very black and white about it. If I say yes, then it's going to change my life and I'm going to have to go through it all the way, as opposed to changes are going to happen and then I'll be able to make new decisions.
Isn't that interesting? Yes, it does become an either or instead of, okay, we've done this, there's an outcome. What do we do next? I'm thinking about this from the perspective of how we speak to each other then. And when we're talking about things that we hate to do, I know one of the things that I hate to do, that I have resistance to every single time when somebody, it could be anybody, says, do it. I'm like, who are you? And why are you telling me what to do? And so initially, I have a reaction right there. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I have that reaction. Let's just go, yeah, I got that reaction, and say what comes next. And sometimes I'm like, nope, I just got to say, what are you talking about? How much is that past experience and repatterning that's necessary versus somewhere of, don't you trust me enough to do this? Aren't I smart enough to get this done on my own? Why do you think you have to tell me how to whatever? And it could be as absurd as put sunscreen on, if you think about it. And there's that reaction, and it could be very serious too. And it's the same reaction. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around that.
Well, my first question is, do you know anybody that likes to be told what to do?
No.
When someone from the outside says, you need to do that, immediately, even if it's a good idea, don't tell me what to do. But the thing that's more dangerous is when it's happening on the inside. And you're saying to yourself, wow, I got to sit down and write. And then that voice says, I don't want to. Don't tell me what to do. I want to sit out here and twiddle my thumbs or watch my latest YouTube videos or whatever it is. That power struggle inside yourself is where I think the resistance really needs to be worked out from.
Okay, we're going to sit there for a minute, because once I said it started with me internally, and the second one, it was all external. However, there are probably some commonalities there. So we're going to go back inside, and we're going to be talking about this inner self and our own self-dialogue. Can we start within ourselves, or do we have to look at how people are already talking to us to understand where our patterns are coming from?
You and I'm imagining, might be the type that wants to look at where the patterns came from. There are other people that still need to move forward, that are having difficulties maybe with this internal struggle about it, that might not want to, it might not be their style to do that inner work in that way. Everything can really come down to behavior, outcomes. So if you're stalling, if you're procrastinating, I mean, most of what procrastination does is it gets under your skin so much, you feel so bad about procrastinating that finally you make a different choice. That's kind of how it works. So somebody else who's sort of not wanting to do something, and maybe they're procrastinating or they can't get around to doing it, and the boss is not going to be happy with it. Well, it could just be that that outer fear of not getting the bonus is what helps them push through it.
Even though I know everybody's different, I'm like, dude, at some point it comes down to just making a choice. And that's what I heard you say. Whether it's internal or external to ourselves, at some point you got to just take the action.
That's right.
That's right.
Action. You've got to leave your job, or you've got to find a way to do it.
Exactly.
If we're going to break it down to that example, there's so many examples that we could be talking about right now.
It's very true. And yes, it applies to everything. You know, one of the things that I noticed early on when I was starting to recognize, okay, if I'm finding resistance, or I just really don't like this. Usually I didn't sit down and I wasn't very thoughtful and going, I've got this resistance here and I wonder what I can do about it. It's like, I really hate this. And what am I going to do about how much I hate this? And then I would look at it closer and go, oh, you know, sometimes I don't really hate it. It's just annoying to me. Sometimes I don't really hate it. It's just I've spread myself too thin. And then I'm like, oh, what am I saying to myself? Why can't I say no to these people? What is in me that is requiring me to do all of these things? And now I'm in this place that I hate everything.
Well, let me ask you this. We're not talking about something specific, so it might help to get a specific situation. And then I want to ask some questions.
All right, let me see if I can think of this. I love to volunteer. Part of my whole existence is giving my time. I'm a Girl Scout leader. I just finished my position as leadership in the business and professional women of Boulder and Colorado. I am interviewing this week to be able to go through the background process so I can help mentor young unwed mothers that are going to give their kids up for adoption. Okay. And on top of that, I have a full-time business. I have a radio show. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. Usually not in that order, but all those things. That's only like the first handful of things that I do. So this concept of saying no, I'm like, oh, you need help planning this event. Okay, I can help with that. And everybody disappears and then I do the whole thing. Or, right? And I'm like, now I really hate this. I love planning events. I love being the MC. I think it's great to put all these together, but why did everybody scatter to the wind? That particular situation, then I hate it. I didn't think I was going to make it to the event. I was 3 months out on the event. Everybody had disappeared. I'm doing this thing all by myself. It was a big event. It wasn't gigantic, but I was building it from scratch. It was 100 people. There were speakers and presenters and sponsors and all of these things. And people helped as much as they could, but they helped as much as I thought I would be helping when we all pitched in a little bit more together. And so here I am going, well, here's this vision we made. Everybody walked away. I can't say no because I know it can be done and I know I can do it. And I couldn't say no. I couldn't say, let's scale back. I couldn't do any of those things because I was going to let somebody down.
Well, I think that's such a good example because the end feeling was, I hate this. When you were doing it, you were like, I hate this. Maybe you were having some dialogue about why am I resisting it or why am I resisting loving it or something like that. And what I think is so great about this example, and here's a takeaway. If you find yourself saying, I hate this, or feeling resistant, or saying I'm in resistance, it's always a great signal for what is it I need to know about this situation, as opposed to trying to overcome it first, or trying to shift your pattern and make yourself be happy with something you're not happy with. What is it I need to know? And you have a treasure trove of information now. One is you're saying yes too much. Two is if you're going to take something like that on, you now know the magnitude of it and you will not do it without help, because it's not doing it that you hate it. It's the overwhelm that you hate it.
Yes. Yes.
And the feeling of being burdened that now is a part of that experience. Those are great things that you learned that you'll hopefully never do again. And next time when you're feeling that, I hate this, for something that you said yes to that you think you liked, you'll know, okay, I'm hating this because I'm not paying attention to something else.
When it got done, of course, I was asked to do the event again, and I said no. And I held my ground. I said, you know what? You have a template. You have all the process. I'll even go one step further and go, everything I did in 5 months, I'll tell you how to do in 12. So it's way less work all the way through. And I will step back and say, here's my contribution. Love it. Leave it. I'm just going to be done here. It was really hard because I'm watching now and nothing is happening. And I'm watching and nothing is happening. And I know somebody's going to come in. Can you swoop in and save the day? And here's the thing. I love being Superwoman and I love saving the day. What I love more is myself. And what I love more are the people who I can give the most to when I have time. And so here's this piece of me going, exactly what you were saying. My outcome is I've got this awareness now. Yeah, of course I can do that. And it's easy. I have skills. I can make it happen. But it drains my soul. It hurts my heart. And when my soul and my heart are empty, everything else in my life suffers too. And it's no good. We're no good at work. We're no good in our families. We're no good in our communities that way.
It really switches the whole thing around from, why do I hate this? I should get myself to feel better about this, to, wait, I hate this because I was crossing my own boundaries of what's right for me in my life and how I spend my energy and what I want to give.
I would say another takeaway would be is I found some boundaries.
Yes, that's a huge takeaway.
Right?
Yeah.
Huge
Yeah.
takeaway. I found some boundaries. And sometimes, okay, well, let's think about that for a minute. First, I'm going to take a quick station break. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and you are listening to Blair and I talk about the truth about the things that we hate to do.
Resistance, or the feeling of hating doing something, is an invitation to find a boundary and make a boundary.
And it can be really hard to say no. It can be really hard to go, of course I can do that. Yet recognizing when I say yes to that, I'm saying no to something else. And when I'm saying no to something else, can I really live with the outcomes of what I'm saying no to? And when the answer is absolutely not, And there's always an absolutely in front of that. If there's not, I don't think the boundary's been found.
That's a good one. I'm going to put that one in my thing. Is there an absolutely here
Yeah.
to help me know if I'm on the right track?
If it's not, then we're not clear, or we're choosing not to be clear, or we're keeping it fuzzy for some other reason. And then I think it's time to go back to the beginning and go, what is going on here? Yeah. Asking the question what is it that I need to know here? And keep working with that and let it be a cycle. And it sounds like you in your life are able to almost do this without thinking.
Took a lot of years.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say I do anything without thinking. So that's a myth too. But I do have a good discipline of listening to myself and self-inquiry.
How do you sit down and have the discipline to listen to yourself?
I think it comes from paying attention. I mean, when people have not been in a practice of self-reflection, their lives start to look pretty messy. Because not choosing intentionally and not paying attention to what's happening inside will make everything on the outside reflect back to you what you're not looking at. At that point, when things are a mess, that you start to say, wait a second, maybe I have something to do with that. And as you go on in that process of self-reflection, you stop needing to create it all on the outside because you've gotten to pay attention to your feelings, your thoughts, your sensations, understand which thoughts and feelings have value to pay attention to and which ones are just chatter.
I'm thinking about managers and senior teams that are listening to this going, okay, so some of what I'm seeing in my team that I don't like or that needs to change or that could be better, even though things are going great, starts right here with me, the leader, in this spot. I now have a choice. Am I willing to face to get us to wherever we need to go, to the next level, to break through, to change whatever needs to be changed? Am I willing to do that in that particular thing? We're talking a lot about self. And when we're confident and start practicing in ourselves, do we, even before we think about our teams, do we see differences in the results of the people around us?
This is such an incredible topic. And what's going to really help get to the nugget here is to find an imaginal or real situation at work. That we can pull from. So let's think about a leader that's noticing that things with the team aren't going as well as they could. Can you think of an example?
A business who's been around now for, 4 years, and that startup phase, that high energy, that everything that's going on, it's still working and people are still energized, yet the results are changing. We're not seeing the same results we did originally. And so here I am, I'm this person, I'm sitting in the chair and making these decisions and I'm watching things level out. And we're still doing things as a startup. And so of course, here I am going, well, these are the businesses I work with. So where do you got to go? Got to switch that mentality.
When you are in a leadership position, and leadership is always very challenging, but what's different than personally is that it seems like there's a lot more at stake because there is a whole enterprise that you are a part of and have a piece of responsibility for. And there are other people that you're accountable for. And so that provides a good container for you to be a spearhead, to spearhead some change. The situation that you described is not that different than what we are talking about internally, but there are some key differences. One being that you do have these other people and this other organization that you're responsible to. You see things leveling out, and what's happening is a feeling. Maybe it's a feeling of panic. Maybe it's a feeling of, oh, we don't want to stall out. And maybe other people are starting to feel it too. But as the leader, you're definitely hip to it. Then that invites us to the question. You wouldn't, as a leader in today's world with all the information we have, you wouldn't just try to go back to do the same thing that you are doing harder. You would say, and you would know, this is time for change. I do recommend people who are unseasoned or even seasoned people, to be honest, to get some help in that change, whether it's outside through a coach or consultant, or whether it's through a mentor who's in a parallel or similar business who's done it before. Because the process of going from one phase to another in business is not easy. It's messy. And it's an environment in which a leader can take all sorts of things personally.
Cheers to that. And none of us are immune.
Yeah. No.
None of us. man, woman, 10th company, first company, doesn't matter. I completely agree with that. We will all take things personally at some point or another.
Especially when, as the necessary part of growth and cycles, there's a dip. And you're like, I'm failing. It's
Right.
not exactly true. It's just that there's a reorganization happening, and dips are often a part of growth.
It's usually a signal that it's time for change. When it comes to culture and this feeling of this drive and this excitement and this adrenaline that comes from the startup culture, that's really not sustainable. It has such a short life. Some people can spread it out to like 10 years, 15 years, but they're still going to have a problem at some point in time. They're going to get tired because nobody can live off of adrenaline every single day. And teams can't either. If that's the culture that was created, I almost think the culture is the hardest part of company change, and it's necessary. And you'll have to tell me where it is in the process. To me personally, it's like culture is first. So to make a change in growth and move from a startup to some other mentality of a business, not to stop innovating, but to do things differently and to look at everything differently and to change which value is first in the group of values that we bring. We're going to focus on customers now instead of product getting out there. Whatever it is, doesn't really matter. Taking the time to go, all right, we've got our same set of values. Which one do we put first? And what are the actions that we take for ourselves that we model so that people come along? We all get there eventually though, don't we? Or we find out we're internally asking our own question and we're like, nope, this isn't where I want to be anymore. By taking those slow steps, we're allowing our teams to step up and say, yeah, I'm still in with this, or no, I'm not.
That's a process that benefits most from being transparent. It has to do with communication along the lines of the organization and through all the levels of the organization of, okay, the ship is turning, and talking about different ways that you can have interventions to get everybody on board to the new direction, to congratulate everybody for completing that first phase, and to sort of bring everybody along in moving in the new direction. For me, I think those shifts need to be formalized, and they need to be formalized at all levels in the organization.
Action without any sort of a plan that other people can go, I'm feeling this change, but I don't know what's actually happening here, is sometimes more detrimental to change agents. Now, I love to stir the pot, and I can tell you from personal experience, don't just stir the pot, just stir the pot. Stir the pot with all the right ingredients in it and everybody on board. That is when I'm still in, every once in a while I get in the middle of it and I'm like, oops, I didn't even know that was a pot to stir. Those are the things where that self-awareness that you were talking about, that discipline of listening to ourselves really can come into play also, because the more we listen to ourselves, the more we're automatically in tune to listening to others and hearing what they're not saying. And there's communication to be understood. And then you can have communication that you just and push out, and you're going to hear people go, okay, I get it. I can repeat you. And then there's that concept of actually being understood, where it's got to come back and go, through those actions, through those words, through those conversations, understanding is actually happening. Did I read that on your blog?
I think one of my most recent posts is the difference between self-expression and communication.
Yeah.
And communication, when you express yourself with the goal of communicating, you can tailor what it is you're going to say to the audience, because the intention is for an understanding to happen.
Yes.
And that self-expression is really more an artistic thing. Writing in your diary, nobody needs to understand it. And that there's confusion about those two things sometimes, and they don't go so well. So a boss losing his temper is an act of self-expression. It doesn't really communicate anything useful most of the time. Most of the time.
Right.
And then the example I use when it's confused the other way is a recent example where, for a client of mine, they hired a very impressive graphic designer who made their fonts so small they were basically illegible. And so that was the designer saying, I'm expressing my great design, but not paying attention to the fact that their job was to help the company communicate.
Scott and I, we were having a conversation the other day about this very thing, and he was talking about context and delivery, and the context being what needs to be said and shared and communicated, and the delivery is, who is my audience?
How?
Am I talking to myself or others? Like in a diary, I call it, I'm having a party in my head and I thought you were already there, right? I love that you're underscoring that point of taking what we think we might be saying to communicate and actually recognizing that we might not be if we're not taking in the person we're talking to into consideration with how it is presented and the information that is most important to them within that context. So we're talking about doing things that we hate. We're talking about ways that it shows up. We're talking about the reactions and the experiences that we feel.
Also, I'm going to interrupt you for one second. We really ended up talking about change.
We did.
Which is so interesting, right? We thought we were going to talk about what you don't want to do and resistance, but we really ended up talking about change, which I think is so connected to this feeling of, oh, I don't want to change. Yeah. Okay, sorry to interrupt your flow, but I had to get that in there.
I go to the transformation right away. I'm like, look, this is where we can go and how happy it can be. Thank you for articulating it that way, because you're right. We can't have high energy all the time. And we don't have high energy all the time. We don't always want to show up, yet there are times that we must show up. So if we have this low energy, this resistance, this messy place at the beginning of shifts of change, how do we show up? How do we show up when we're everything we're not supposed to model to another person?
If anyone is listening right now to that and going, well, I don't know, I would encourage you to look within your life at times when it happened, when it was a friend's birthday party and all you wanted to do is bury your head in the sand because your partner left you, or because, you know, something in your life wasn't going well, but you just got your clothes on and went. And maybe you weren't in the best mood, and maybe you pretended a little bit, maybe you didn't, but you showed up. And I think that when things are important enough to us, whether we're feeling our high energy, whether we're feeling our best self, we show up. And sometimes that low energy feeling changes, and sometimes it doesn't. In answering your question, it also is that thing that you're going to show up for important enough for you to show up without feeling like you're your best self.
So we don't have to ever like the things that we hate to do. We have to recognize that there is a message within it for us, and we can find out what we need to do about it or which part of our world is affected, and understand that the boundary is in there somewhere that we're trying to find, to clear the path for, and then honor for ourselves and for the people around us. Every action we choose, our attitude about it, shape how we view the world and how the world views us. So live up to your own values, live up to your company values, and recognize that there's fear that's a part of it. The patterns are a part of it. That the main question, what is it that I need to know? And when it's not clear, it means we need more clarity and need to keep looking for what we need to know to draw the boundary. The discipline of talking to ourselves so that we can talk to other people, and understand that all of those things result in change. They result in some action that is different occurring, so that we can show up, whether we're ready or not, and do what needs to be done. You are listening to The Voice of Bold Business, and you can find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P83. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 83. And you can also search for the truth about things that we hate to do. You've listened. Now subscribe and rate our program. Have it delivered to your preferred listening platform every Tuesday and Friday after they are published. These include Google Play and iHeartRadio and iTunes. Your experiences define what it means to be a leader today. It is bold to go after solutions, to take action, and to make decisions. Your clarity and your feedback loops include starting with ourselves and observing ourselves so that we can observe others. We want to hear from you. What's your truth about the things that you hate to do?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.